Okay, I wanted to make a quick review for Amazon for the Deco BE95. This is the Wi-Fi 7 router from TP-Link. I've been using this guy for about 6 months now, and have had great results with it. I have to say that on initial thought processes, it did seem to be a little rough around the edges, but with firmware updates, they have drastically improved that to the point where uh, it has become the router and Wi-Fi system that I'm using in the home now. So, um, let's talk about the positives up front, and that is that this guy has networking for days. So it has 10 gig interlinks as well as 2.5. So that allows me to interlink these base units at 10 gigabits, so that all of the pod interlinks are allowed to transfer at full throughput. So this means I can move data very rapidly from one pod to the next, or from devices that are connected to a downstream pod back to the home pod, again, very, very quickly with very low latency. Um, but it also allows for wireless interlinking of the devices as well. So while this is not a plume system, and I'm going to benchmark this pretty hard against the plume because that's what I had previously, um, is that it's not as adaptive, but it is very powerful. Um, this Wi-Fi system allows you enough user control that if you want to tinker with it, you can, but enough anonymity that it runs on its own if you're not in there messing with it every single day. So, um, what that means is that I have four of these throughout the home now. I started with two and then moved to four because of the distances required for my network. So I live in a condo on the on the third and fourth floor, and I need to be able to get data down to the first floor entryway. And so that means that I kind of have a tier system where on the fourth floor I have a network, on the third floor I've got a network, and on the second floor I've got a network, so that I can move data all the way down to the first floor. And that allows me to link in my Ring doorbell and all those other good things. So the primary networks are all hardwired, while the one on the second floor is a wireless interlink. And that wireless interlink works very well. Plenty of data throughput on the wireless interlink, no problems there whatsoever. Now, again, one of the main reasons that I switched from the Plume system to the TP-Link was that I had the ability to do the 10 gigabit backhaul. And that proves very useful in my scenario where I'm transferring large amounts of data back and forth across the network all the time. For your average consumer, I don't think this is going to be as big a selling point. But if you do need it, it is fantastic. Now, when it comes to coverage and general range, these pods are not as robust as the Plume system. Just flat out not as robust. So the Plume system, I was able to cover the entire house with 3 pods, whereas this system needs 4 to cover that same range. Um, and the walls in the condo are fairly thick, and so even going from the front to the back of the condo is a really hard ask. And so I've actually had to put units in the front and the back just to get that coverage range that I need. Um, Again, if you step down to a 2.4 gigahertz range, you can get that signal to connect, but you're not going to get the data throughput that you need, or at least that I need. So, and again, this is one of those things where it's a little bit different in between the Plume system and the TP-Link, is that the Plume system would always keep you connected no matter what. The Plume would automatically adjust up and down inside the frequency ranges, auto balancing as you walk throughout the house. It had a fantastic software algorithm for that. Whereas the TP-Link is kind of dumb in that regard, where you move from one pod to the next most of the time, and then if you're not getting good signal, it doesn't change your frequency bands. You have to manually select, do I want high speed or do I want, high connectivity? And, using those in order to switch the bands, you pick what you want. It's a double-edged sword. So the Plume system, you got what you got. There was no way to force it to connect to a faster network. You always had the Plume system deciding for you what it thought was the best solution. Whereas the TP-Link, on the other hand, provides any connection that you want, you select it and you make those decisions, but you may select the wrong one and you have to deal with those consequences. So, again, it's two different ways of looking at the same problem. I don't think there's a right answer to it. So, at least for now, if somebody comes up with something that gives you the speed and the connectivity, I'll send them my money. But as we move into the Wi-Fi 7 era, there are a few things to keep in mind, and that is that the number of devices that can connect to it are very limited right now. So virtually you've got the Android devices that are running the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2s and 8 Gen 3s. Those support that connection. And then some other small pieces, the Intel BE200 and the BE202, I believe, both support that as well. And those are very fresh onto the market right now. I've got one coming into review in the very near future. So, all that said, it is a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario where there are not a lot of devices that can connect with that full throughput in order to validate the true efficacy of this product. So, I'm evaluating it mostly off of one device, and that is the OnePlus Open. And yes, the throughput is there, and I'm able to iPerf and get very high numbers when I'm line of sight to the pods. The other thing that this device does that's a little bit different than the Plume is that, again, you're allowed more leeway with the device. So setting up VPNs, setting up hairpinning. If these terms don't excite you, then you may be looking at the wrong device. Again, this is almost a prosumer device, and it gives you just enough to tweak with, but again, is also able to be thrown into the background and not noticed, which is pivotal for me. Because I need a network that is low maintenance, but still provides me the ability to tinker if I need to, and this fits that bill perfectly. Now, with that said, there were some teething pains at the beginning of this process, and I'll go through a couple of those just so people know what was to see where it is now. And the first one of those was the fan profile. So yes, these units do have active cooling in them, and yes, they do put out some heat. So do keep that in mind. These are not your older style network devices that could run completely passively. These do output some heat. And so the problem that I ran into was that the fan profile was just a little bit weird to me. I could see where they were going with it, but it doesn't make sense once you actually put it into the real world. And that is that they ran the fan profile 100% passive until it reached a certain temperature threshold. Once it reached that threshold, the fans would kick up to say 50% duty cycle, or maybe even higher, and it would cool the device until it brought it back down to a certain threshold, and then would repeat. So it would be completely silent, moderately loud, then completely silent again. And this is not a good fan profile. As someone who's worked a lot on fan profiles for my own personal computing, you really want a nice steady state that is as low as you can make it without having that oscillation. And so with a future firmware, with a firmware revision that they pushed out, they did exactly that. They brought the entire fan curve up a little bit and then created just a whisper quiet fan that ran pretty much all the time, dissipating heat rather than this high peak, low valley, high peak, low valley scenario. Now, why is this important? This is a switch, this is a device that, you put in a corner of a room you don't really think about. Well, for me, the device was sitting on a nightstand right next to the bed. And so I would get startled in the middle of the night as I'm trying to sleep when the fan kicks on and then goes off again. And this was very frustrating for me. So this is a very welcome change, and I really do applaud the engineers for putting the time and effort into making this a much better product. It goes to show that they are working on these, and they actively are trying to tackle some of the larger issues with them. Now, the other issue that I had with it is that the device tends to get very confused very quickly for high density networks. Now, what I mean by that is I've got a lot of networking gear in the system, and so in between my 100 gig switch, my 40 gig switch, my 10 gig switch, etc., 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 it when I plugged it in and it found all these devices on there, it tried to switch into bridge mode rather than to live in the DHCP mode that it should have been in. And really the only way that I've gotten around this is to unplug the other network devices from this, boot it up, and then plug the devices in. And that seems to tame it in some regards. It's still not 100% perfect, but it is 99% reliable doing that method. And I do have an open ticket with the TP-Link group to see if we can improve this functionality to where it doesn't try and auto trip into a different mode if it sees other devices that are capable of handing out DHCP. But we'll see how that works. Now, and then the last one that I had is some very strange sequences when running multiple networks at the same time, and that was resolved again by a firmware revision. It seems that when it would come online and see another Wi-Fi system running at the same time, again, this is a very edge case scenario that I don't think very many people are going to have, but it would cause it to immediately try and assign the IP range that that network was running rather than keeping its own configuration. Again, a small nuance, but one of those that was a little bit frustrating. So, all that said, where is the TP-Link system currently? So the TP-Link system has been moved into my full-fledged system. So I've completely removed all of the Plume networking. I am 100% into the TP-Link ecosystem at this point. This is working very well with my MikroTik switches, my Netgear switches, etc. It is working exceptionally well throughout the house and providing a very loud network that can test with the others that are in the same condominium complex that I am. So, is this the perfect switch? Probably not. But is it the best switch that I have tried to date? Yes. Yes, it is. So, with that said, what other switches have we tried? We have tried the Orbi switches. When I say switches, I mean routers. We've tried Orbi, we've tried Plume, we've tried Asus, um, technically Eero as well, but that was very short lived. And a lot of these systems have really good points and pieces to them, but none was the complete package. For me, the TP Link really is that full package that I was able to get everything that I wanted out of and, still be a very powerful networking device. Now, downside to it, it is incredibly expensive. I still strongly believe that for the price that you pay, you should be getting three devices, not two devices. Um, it is it is prohibitively expensive, and to have four devices in the house makes that even more so. So I would wait until you see a sale that brings this down into the price bracket where you can get three devices rather than paying for two devices. So keep on the lookout for that. If you see that price drop down to where it makes a little bit more sense, I would jump on it. This is really a good product and I strongly recommend it.
Hola, quiero comentarte que esta bocina me está dando problemas. Son como 5 ocasiones que me ha fallado, que se va el internet y de repente se pone roja. No sé a qué se deba. Si salió defectuosa esta TP-Link Wi-Fi Mesh o hay algún otro problema de instalación. Pero las otras dos no hay mayor problema, están perfectamente bien. Gracias.